During the summer of 1980, I had the pleasure of meeting Maria von Trapp. Not Julie Andrews, the real Maria von Trapp. I was doing summer stock theater in Vermont, and the von Trapp family lodge is in Stowe, Vermont. It sits on a mountain with the most breathtaking view you can imagine. Maria and the captain had selected that spot because it reminded them of their homeland, Austria. And the lodge was open to the public, and you could go and meet Maria, so I did on several occasions. She was in her 70s at the time. Maria was known internationally, of course, because of the movie The Sound of Music. But one of the things she was known for locally was her driving. Maria had a silver Mercedes convertible, and people told me right when I got to Vermont, if you ever see a silver Mercedes convertible on the road, get off the road. Because Maria liked to zoom around those mountains. That same summer, my sister Wendy happened to be performing in The Sound of Music here in Savannah, and she was playing Maria. And so I had this incredible idea, wouldn't it be cool if I could get the real Maria von Trapp to contact my sister who was playing her here in Savannah? Well, I figured if I went to the Von Trapp Lodge for a nice evening meal, I'd probably have a better chance of talking with Maria privately and having a better chance of getting her to contact Wendy. I was a starving actor at the time, so I didn't have the money for that kind of meal, but I really wanted to do this for my sister. Everyone else in the theater company were starving actors too, so I couldn't ask any of them to go with me to splurge on this meal. So I went alone, and I got there around 7 o'clock, gave my order to the waitress, and then said, "By the way, is there a chance I might speak with Maria?" "I'm sorry," the waitress said, "Maria has already gone to bed." And so I'm having this very expensive meal by myself for no reason at all. And I leave the place broke and dejected, and I'm walking to the parking lot, and I pass by this car that is parked right beside the Von Trapp family lodge. It's a silver Mercedes convertible. That's got to be the car I've heard all about, so it's got to be Maria's, and its top was down. And so I found a scrap piece of paper and scratched out a note, "Dear Maria, my sister is playing you in Savannah, Georgia. Would you mind contacting her in some way?" and so forth. And I then put the torn out piece of paper on the seat of the driver's side. And about a week later, I get a phone call from my sister saying, "Billy, you won't believe who I just got a letter from today. Maria von Trapp." And so that says a lot about the real Maria. That was mighty, mighty nice of her. I go to the hills when my heart is lonely. I know I will hear what I've heard before. My heart will be blessed with the sound of music, and I'll sing once more. These wonderful lyrics by Oscar Hammerstein sound similar to some of the Psalms in the Bible, don't they? I lift my eyes to the hills. From where does my help come? My help comes from the Lord who made heaven and earth. Both the lyrics of the song and the psalm have the same timbre, don't they? The same tone. Both talk about being empowered, renewed, experiencing something special, supernatural, by being in a special place, namely the hills. Here at Asbury, we often talk about thin places. The ancient Celtic Christians said that thin places were sacred places where the boundary between heaven and earth almost seemed invisible. When it seems as though heaven and earth have come together, only a thin veil separating them. And so these are places where a deep sense of God's presence and power become known to us in our everyday world, where the spiritual and the natural world intersect for us in a meaningful way. A thin place for Maria was the mountains, the hills. Music also took her to a thin place. Music helped her experience the sacred, the holy. What are your thin places? Where are they? What are they? I hope you've thought about that before. I hope you're going to those places. In this world that can be so challenging and chaotic, we need things and places that help us to experience God. And as you know, Jesus was constantly going off by himself into the hills or up a mountain or in a garden or on a beach or in a boat. He found places that helped him feel close to God. I encourage you to do likewise. About 20 years ago, church members Michael and Elizabeth Terry, wonderful people, they had Elizabeth's Restaurant. They had a really nice tree house built in our backyard for our 4 kids. Unfortunately, hardly any of them ever used it. My daughter Christy, our nature girl, used it when she got older. But recently, Sherry, my wife, has really gotten into going up into the tree house. I'll be in our house calling and calling her. I see her car in the driveway. I'm not getting any answer. And then I remember, oh, she's probably up in the tree. And she is getting in touch with the great spirit that resides in her and beyond her. And so, like Maria and Jesus and Sherry, find your thin places and use them so you can experience a more meaningful and fulfilling life. It will give you peace. It will help you be able to sing through the night like a lark who is learning to pray. That's one of the greatest phrases ever written for a song, folks. Some of the best lyrics right there. To sing through the night. To sing through the night like a lark who is learning to pray. I could preach about 5 sermons just on that one phrase. Find some thin places. Find places that help you feel close to God so you'll be able to sing through the night like a lark who is learning to pray. There are so many great messages in this musical. It takes place, of course, just before the start of World War II. Captain von Trapp was an Austro-Hungarian who had served as a submarine captain in the Austro-Hungarian Navy in World War I. Now he is being offered a position in Germany's Navy. But the captain is realizing that this Hitler guy isn't who everyone thinks he is. Everyone's following him. But the captain says, no, this isn't right. This is wrong. And he opposes the Nazis and what they stand for. He refuses to take the position he is offered, and he keeps getting more and more pressure from the Nazis. And he and Maria and the family flee away, leave their homeland, and find this beautiful place in Vermont. And so on this Veterans Day weekend, we remember one who stood his ground and who stood up against tyranny. But I think the most prominent message in the musical revolves around Maria and her vocation. I went from being a professional actor in theater to going into the ordained ministry. Well, Maria did just the opposite, didn't she? The play starts with her training to be a nun. She is dedicating her life to ordained ministry, but it doesn't seem to be a good fit for her, and she eventually moves in a different direction. And thank God she did, right? All of our lives have been richer for it. Maria leaves the convent and becomes involved in the lives of young children, and the rest is history. Back in the 1990s, a young man named Dan started attending this church. Very talented, incredible tenor voice, a big fellow with an incredible voice, and he was very smart, super intelligent. He also had a great passion for ministry, for service, and especially for children. And as I got to know Dan, my brain started thinking, this guy would be a really good fit here at Asbury, a good guy to have on staff at Asbury. He's really smart, talented, has this passion for helping people. Dan is someone who had helped me build up this church. He was perfect. There was just one problem. The church didn't have any money. In fact, we couldn't even afford to pay me a full salary. I was working at another church, working part-time at that church in Thunderbolt and working part-time at this church. So if we couldn't pay for a full-time minister, we couldn't add even more staff. I was hoping that Dan would stay in Savannah long enough for us to build up this church and build up our finances so we could afford to get Dan on staff. He would be a great asset for us. We could do some great things. Well, before long, Dan left his job in Savannah and accepted a position at some camp in North Georgia. I couldn't believe it. What was Dan thinking? A camp? He's so talented, so smart, and he just didn't seem to be the camp type. I tried to be happy for Dan, but I was disappointed. We could have done some great things at Asbury together. In the back of my mind, I thought, well, maybe it won't work out for him. Maybe he'll be back in Savannah one day. And maybe by then we'll have the money to hire him. Well, that didn't happen. I hadn't seen Dan in about 20 years. The Sunday we were supposed to have this Sound of Music service was October 9th. But of course, Hurricane Matthew had something to say about that. And like all of you, Sherry and I contemplated evacuating. But we couldn't. Or at least it would be an incredible challenge for us. Both of her parents are basically confined to wheelchairs. And we have 4 dogs. Where could we all go? There were a couple of families in our congregation who live ways outside of Savannah, who saw Sherry's post about us staying in Savannah and who were nice enough and crazy enough to invite us to stay with them. But we didn't want to put these families through that kind of chaos. 4 adults, 2 in wheelchairs, and 4 dogs, adding to already their families. So Sherry and I decided we would just do our best toughing it out here in Savannah through the storm. But then at the last minute, Sherry gets a message from none other than Dan. The guy we hadn't seen for years. He says, I have the perfect place for you. I am the director of a camp for people with disabilities in North Georgia. We've just built a new facility designed for people in wheelchairs. There are 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a kitchen, and a large meeting area, and it's brand new. No one's ever been in it. The beds haven't even been slept in before. You'll have the whole place to yourself, and it's surrounded by woods, so the dogs will love it too. Wow, that sounded incredible. But since I had made up my mind that we were staying in Savannah, and since I wasn't sure how the traveling would go, I was still hesitant about leaving. And then Sherry gave me a little talk. Billy, you just wrote a book about wow moments. You don't think this is a wow moment? A place that is comfortable for my folks and the dogs? It sure sounds like a wow moment to me. And she had a point. And since I didn't want her to feel too big-headed, I didn't mention the fact that Dan's last name happens to be Matthew. Realizing perhaps that this was indeed a wow moment, we agreed to accept Dan Matthew's invitation and not stay in Savannah for Hurricane Matthew. So off on the journey we went. We pulled up in our 2 vans, me with the dogs in their cages, Sherry with her parents in their wheelchairs and one of the dogs. Dan was there waiting for us, and he said, "Wow, you really took me up on it." I'm kidding. He was very welcoming. And the house was as perfect for us as Dan described. And was I ever so thankful that Dan Matthews didn't stay in Savannah and he took that job at the camp. The camp is like nothing I've ever seen. It's amazing. It's called Camp Twin Lakes. It's huge. It's in Rutledge, Georgia, near Madison. It is for young people with disabilities or illnesses or other medical issues. The camp has a medical lodge where children can receive chemotherapy and dialysis and lab tests. There are 30 large cabins to stay in, a 400-seat dining hall, a gymnasium, an amphitheater. They have archery, tennis, and miniature golf, all wheelchair accessible. This camp offers canoeing, kayaking, horseback riding, a ropes course, nature trails, and the coolest tree house I've ever seen. And it has a farm with animals and vegetables, and a teaching kitchen where campers learn about preparing fresh, healthy meals. It's amazing. And besides being an all-year camp for children and youth with disabilities, they have a family warrior weekend for active and retired servicemen and women and their families, especially those who have been wounded. They have a week-long camp for kids who have a parent serving in the military. My favorite story that Dan likes to tell is about a girl who is confined to her wheelchair. And at the camp, they have the ability to hoist people out of their wheelchairs and put them on a zip line. And when the girl got down from the zip line experience, she was in tears and said, "I may not be able to walk, but I can fly." And I wanted this guy to stay with me in Savannah. He's doing amazing things. What God has done with him. You see, on the weekend that we had planned to use the sound of music, on the weekend, I was going to focus on Maria's vocational journey from ordained ministry to real-life children's ministry. I went out of town and experienced the male version of Maria Von Trapp. Here was Dan Matthews, not going into the ordained ministry, but touching the lives of countless children and youth and their parents in so many powerful and wonderful ways. You don't have to be a nun or a minister to do God's work. In fact, we are all called to be ministers. This is our vocation as we seek to follow the way of Christ. In fact, you have ways of reaching people that I don't have, that you can reach people in ways I can't reach them. No person, and I've talked about this fellow before, no person has influenced my faith and my spiritual journey more than a man named Carter B. Harrison. You know what Carter B. did for a living? He ordered and put monuments and tombstones on graves. That's what he did to make money. But that's not who Carter B. Harrison was. He was a man of great love and compassion. He and his wife decided to invite children, youth, to come to their house all over Savannah, and they called it Teens for Christ. This man touched so many lives. So whatever you do to make a living, know it's also a way for you to live out the gospel. And how do we do that? It's simple. We love. We love. That's what it's all about. And as hard as it gets, we love. Love always wins. And I probably shouldn't use the word wins, because that's really not what it's about. Love is what completes us. It's the Alpha and the Omega. It's where we came from. It's where we were born out of. It's our source. And it's where we end up. For, of course, God is love. If you are always offering love and compassion, you will always be able to sing through the night like a lark who is learning to pray. I want me to read to you the words you sang at the very beginning of the service. Joyful, joyful, we adore thee, God of glory, Lord of love. Hearts unfold like flowers before thee, opening to the sun above. Melt the clouds of sin and sadness. Drive the dark of doubt away. Giver of immortal gladness, fill us with the light of day. Mortals, join the mighty chorus which the morning stars began. Love divine is reigning o'er us, binding all within its span. Ever singing, march we onward, victors in the midst of strife. Joyful music leads us sunward in the triumph song of life. And then the last stanza of the song we just sung. Lord, your summons echoes true when you but call my name. Let me turn and follow you and never be the same. In your company I'll go, where your love and footsteps show. Thus I'll move and live and grow in you, and you in me. Amen and amen.